We've had an upset in every group so far here at the WCS Premier League. Groups A through C happened in the past 3 days. One more group left for this weekend here in Burbank, California. That's coming right up. It will be Group D. Now, there's several interesting things about this group. Of course, we'll get to break that down with Huckett in control here to start things off. But let's talk about the previous groups a little bit. I mean, we've had, of course, the expected Koreans moving out in the first of each group every single time. But then the second seed has been a little bit interesting for all three groups, wouldn't you? Especially yesterday. I want to break that down because some people are like, well, you know, Sen, he's really good. Why is everyone surprised? But then some other people, I don't know. Showtime had a lot of hype around him for a very good reason.
Yeah, I do think of the upsets, yesterday would be the least of them. Sen, it goes back all the way to NASL and like Wings of Liberty period of time where he was doing really, really well and has won big tournaments. He is an accomplished gamer. But, lately he's just – it's weird to harp on this because he's only 28 years old, but he has gotten older. He's playing a lot less. With WCS, it means that there's a lot less international events for him to travel to as much. So WCS kind of becomes the focal point. And he comes into this as a Taiwanese player that, we're not too familiar with. We don't see him at your DreamHacks. We don't see him at your not that many IEMs. And he, let's also be honest, his group was not like, GSL round of 8 or something like that. Like it was a tough group, but a manageable one. But to beat Showtime, a 20-some-odd-year-old, I think 22.
18.
What? Is it 18?
I think he's 18.
Is Showtime 18?
Well, very young.
Yeah, one of them is like younger
Maybe
than the other.
Hero
Showtime
Marine.
and Hero Marine.
Hero Marine's very young.
Yeah, Hero Marine's the much younger
I think
one,
he's 2022. But anyways, he is the guy that lately has been making some really deep runs in WCSs. He's been doing very well in Europe and beating Koreans as well as the top-tier non-Koreans. So that was the guy that all eyes were kind of on as the rising talent. And yet, Sen, and by the way, Sen, he cheesed when he needed to, but for the most part, he was pretty rock steady, straightforward, and it was cool to see.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, we talked briefly before the show started today, and one of the other reasons you said that was surprising was because Showtime actually showed up. I mean, he showed up to play really well. He took a map off of Jaedong, and it looked like he could even win that series for the first seed of the group.
Yeah, it was more of how he won that game. It was a long macro game, Cactus Valley, with 30, 40 minutes, the game we casted, and he played it
very well.
He could have attacked more. He could have, gone for a quicker game, but he played really passive, really put together. Like, he was confident, and then against Sen, he fell apart, I guess.
Yeah, well, so that was the story yesterday. Sen eventually makes it through. Of course, Jaedong moving out first in that group. But what are all these players playing for, and what are they up for here in the WCS Premier League? Currently in the round of 32, as we just mentioned. Groups A through C happened in the past 3 days. Group D left here for the Burbank, California studio. E through H will happen in Cologne, Germany in a week or so time. And then they all lead to the round of 16. 2 players from each group of the round of 32 get seeded into another group stage of the round of 16 where it's double elimination. And then it leads into the tense single elimination bracket stage for the round of 8, all leading up to one champion to be crowned in the WCS Premier League Season 3, the last season of 2015. And what do you get if you win all that? Of course, the first prize, the prize money, and the WCS points stand out quite a bit. But aside from that, too, I mean, there's a lot to fight for. I mean, each stage makes such a big jump that it's not like it only matters for first place. Everyone's gunning for that. But at the same time, each round is going to matter quite a bit for a lot of these players.
Prestige, too, to be honest. If you make it far enough, we still remember Showtime because of his result in the first season where he did make that round of 4 appearance. And that's carried him pretty much for the whole year.
Yeah, very true. I mean, we talked about this for some players, like even round of 16. It's something that you're going to talk about the next year where you come in and you're like, they've made round of 16 last time. Can they get to the round of 8? It's something that you set a bar for yourself for the community to remember you around. Let's take a look at where everyone is then. In terms of that prestige and the WCS points, which of course leads to the global finals at BlizzCon later this year, you can see at the very top of the whole rankings, it's going to be Hero and then SOS being at right that mark of rank 16 where it cuts off from Korea. But for the players that we've seen this week so far, Hydra securing his spot already at rank 6, possibly higher with the points he wins this season. Polt also gunning for a higher seed in the top 16. Jaedong still in the run for it, and today we'll see Marine Lord, Ayaguz, Masa, and Haas.
And it's huge, and for 2 reasons, well, multitude of ones. But, Chober, you were asking Jaedong yesterday about WCS points and how important is it to him, and he was very aware. He's like, I do not have enough, missed season 1. He's said I'm very worried, and that's just how important BlizzCon is to all of these players, but also something that Chris touched on with prestige. For some of these guys, and in particular this group, even if they win the entire WCS season, they're going to have to show up at Mike Morheim's house and ask for another 1,000 WCS points. They're going to have to win like a dream hack. Like, there's got to be some stuff going on there. So for them, it's not so much the WCS points in Season 3. It's more about, as you guys were saying, making that round of 4, beating a Polt. Imagine the guy that knocks out Hydra. He will be talked about for a very long time if that were to happen. So there is still things to play for. And in StarCraft, a lot of your name and your integrity is built on your success. So it's really important for these guys to do as well as they can.
Yeah, again, there are matches that weren't finals that we still talk about to this day, whether it's 2 years ago, 5 years ago. So that's something to keep in mind for these players. Well, let's take a look at what they've been up to in terms of their matchups. Of course, Groups A through C already happening. We know who moved on. Polt Patreus for Group A, Elfie and Hydra from Group B. Elfie, the big upset there. Jaeyoung and Sen from yesterday. And today, we have 4 players, no Koreans in this group, but still, we would argue, pretty much a big favorite in Marine Lord. And, of course, Groups E through H, as you can see. Only one Terran there, actually.
Yes.
That's something fun to point out. We just found
the
that
dying
out.
breed of Terrans. Like, we've got Polt going through, and then we're going to have at least one. Unless Haas, once again, tries to extinct the Terrans. But it's interesting how underrepresented they are here, and it's important that we get a few into that round of 16.
Yeah, it will be pretty intense. But they're stacked up today. We'll see lots of TVTs and whatnot, so it should be a fun group. Well, let's meet the players that will be battling for the 2 seeds going out from Group D.
How much do you play, by the way?
And as we mentioned, Marine Lord.
Don't answer that.
Marine Lord being the big favorite here in Group D. We can focus on that a little bit with their match coming up. Of course, Haas and Aegis too. That one's coming up as match number 2, but let's just have brief thoughts on that one. What do you guys think?
So, one quick comment, and we got to speed this along. But Marine Lord is the favorite, I would say, on paper. But man, look out for Mausa and Aegis in particular. They're TVT snipers, and they have been kind of through their duration. In that second match, Haas is the wild card. Who knows that much about Haas? I mean, he's kind of famous for being an ultimate cheeser.
Yes.
And cheese in PvT can be very strong, but it's at the same time, all the Terran players know that.
Yes.
So I'm going to be very disappointed today if, like, a proxy Oracle gets into a naked mineral line and just wrecks them. I think that'll be very sad.
Yeah, for me, it's Marine Lord. I feel like you said, Mausa and Aegis are surprisingly good. And more than that, they're very underrated. From the outside in, from the general fan perspective, they don't see these guys that often. They see Marine Lord very often, goes to a lot of the European tournaments. Mausa just doesn't. He lives in Canada. There's really not that many North American tournaments. So WCS, that is where he has come. He has chosen this tournament, and he can actually prove himself. And I think he's very good. He's a good friend of mine. He's an amazing player, and I think he's going to really show it today.
Yeah, of course, I think you guys bring up a good point. It'll be interesting to see if that comes into play, because Marine Lord, just from an overall community standpoint, if you just kind of watch your WCSs, because you're like, oh, well, every season it comes back, I want to see who gets the most points, you're going to remember this guy, because you always talk about him when you talk about the new European talent, especially from France. It's Little Bao and the Marine Lord always in there. For some people talk about Fire King along those lines, but Marine Lord,
French overlords.
Yeah, basically, they're trying to come in and they're trying to say, all right, we're going to try to take the scene by storm once again here towards the end of Heart of the Swarm, and Marine Lord looks ready for this match.
He does. He practices a lot with 4GG on the same team as him, and they're kind of legendary practice partners in that way. And here he is. He comes from a very competitive European scene in particular, where, like we've been talking about, you've been hearing it all weekend long in this WCS broadcast, but the French scene in particular, Petit Drogo, a name that was left off that list, that is absolutely incredibly good. And in fact, with recent results, he might even be, I don't know, it's hard because they're kind of going back and forth, but it's like, he might be the best.
I mean, the fact that they're going back and forth and whatnot is the interesting part, is that they, among themselves, are also such great rivals that they keep pushing each other forward. But Marine Lord's opponent for today, Chris, as you were mentioning, Mausa, not someone to be overlooked just because maybe you haven't heard of him as much in the WCS Premier League.
Yeah, but he's a very good player. Even this Challenger result, he went up against Bales, and Bales is another player that's kind of been on the cusp of making that premier performance, and then on top of that, he's one of the best Protosses in North America. He's a great player, super underrated as well. So I'm gonna really cheer for Mausa here. I feel like a lot of the North American talent, the younger talent, are right on that level. They're ready to be shot into space. They're rising stars, but they just haven't had the opportunity yet, and Mausa can do that today.
Yeah, and looking at the map picks, Coda actually being left out just as the last map. Not vetoed, but also no one too eager to set that up for their TVT here.
It's too bad. It's TVT. I would have loved to have seen Moonlight Madness all of a sudden.
I feel like, though, it's more likely that we see crazier maps in mirror matchups because it's not as dependent on the map.
Yeah, would make sense. Of course, Iron Fortress, another map we haven't seen too much of, and also the mirror matches, like you mentioned, Chris. We haven't seen too much of that. Now, I know, especially you, Chris, you're not a big fan of the Terrans and their Widow Mines, but just in general, what is your thought about TVT overall right now?
It's always a question of build orders. You know, you do get a small advantage here or there depending on what build order you pick, but then on top of that, the big question is, will one player go for more of that bio style? Will one go for the mech? Will they both go for bio, both go for mech? That's going to be the big story here. And then it's going to be, can they change it up, you know? Because it's very likely that these players will either play each other again in the, later in the group, or they're going to play another Terran in the group. And if you reveal too much in the early game, in the early part of these stages, it might come back and bite you in the end if you don't have anything up your sleeve when it really matters.
Yeah, you got to expect that you could have some rematches, especially in terms of the matchups, of course. Chris, what do you think for our 3 players here today? Do you know if any of them strictly prefer one style or the other in terms of bio versus mech?
I have no idea, actually. I know Marine Lord trades really well against 4GG, and I think he's preferring mech lately, but I don't even know if I should say something. Maybe Igus is watching the broadcast.
Oh, fair enough, fair enough. Jeff, what about you?
We're going to see a lot of bio. Both Massa and Igas typically do favor bio in TVT. Marine Lord has been more mech, but that's kind of been more of like a TVZ thing. Should still show up in TVT as well. It's very powerful. One bad fight, though, and you're in a lot of trouble. But that's pretty true with that style anyways.
All right, well, let's find out. You guys have told us that Massa pretty good at that mirror matchup. Is Marine Lord still going to live up to the hype of Europe, though? For our very first game of Group D, it is going to be Nate and Roddy bringing us the game.
France has been rising throughout the course of this year, Roddy, but can they take it home with a solid Season 3 finish? Marine Lord has been one of the flag bearers. Of course, Lilbo finished second place in WCS for Season 2 Premier. These guys have been making France look so good this year.
Absolutely, and I mean, Marine Lord was only his first Premier League appearance ever last season, and he went straight into the quarterfinals, and of course, he is looking for a repeat performance in Season 3 of 2015.
That's right. We are loaded in. As you guys can see, we've got cross spawns on Iron Fortress, and in the bottom left position, we have our first Terran player, the French player representing Millennium. He's Marine Lord. Known for probably the longest series, actually the longest couple of series that we had at the Season 2 Round of 16 playoffs. His opponent in the Northeast, playing for Root Gaming and representing Canada, he is Massa.
You're talking about the series against Firecake?
Both series against Fire King.
Yes, indeed. Marine Lord definitely loves to play some mech every now and then, and that goes for this matchup as well. In my memory, I've seen him play bio a couple of times in this matchup, but I was talking with him a little bit in the start of the day, and he said, like, nah, he's like, TVT. He's like, I'm gonna mech it up. I was like, what if you play Iron Fortress? He's like, oh yeah, it's fine for mech TVT, nothing wrong with it. I was like, okay, so we're going to see some mech of you? He's like, yeah, most likely.
I would like to see some 4GG-esque play. You know, a lot of Hellions, Vikings in the early game. Always a simple way to deal with a lot of the things you can do on this map with aggressive things like drops or Banshees. The third base is, you know, as a Protoss player, you would agree it's like one of those, it's a little bit further out sometimes. Terran players with bio can catch you off guard and force cancels. If you're going to play mech, you have a similar weakness in that regard. Having one siege tank is rarely enough to just defend that third. You have to constantly be aware of where your opponent goes. So things to look out for in this Terran vs. Terran series. If Marine Lord wants to play that mech style, he's going to have a slow army that's going to be very easy to punish if it moves out into the open, whereas Massa will constantly be looking for those places where he can dive in and get some damage done.
You know, it's funny because I think looking at these two players on paper, a lot of people will favor Marine Lord, probably as an overall favorite for this group. Of course, he made it to the quarterfinals in Season 2, and you know, that helps a lot. And you're often as good as your last performance, Nate. And you know, going by that performance, Marine Lord is very good. Despite the fact that Marine Lord just came back from Gfinity, he didn't really have a phenomenal run there, as he didn't win a single map. Went up against very strong players though. But Massa, for instance, he's made it to Premier League 4 times already in his career. That's pretty impressive. He's looking for that first appearance in the round of 16. I know that he's capable of doing so. And looking at this group, I think Massa looks at this group as well saying, I think I can make it out over here, Nate.
Yeah, both players this game opening up a little aggressively. The multiple Reapers coming out of action.
Oh, he's going to probably end up losing that Reaper, I think.
Yeah, the second Reaper show up for both players, so this one's going to die. Then the Hellion shows up, and a little bit of the momentum actually carries in Marine Lord's favor. Good snipe to turn around and grab that one, but it's so tricky. You do not want to lose it.
Now Marino should send his Hellion back. That's exactly what he does. Really well done. He's just like kind of outplaying Masa here in the early stages. Masa made a good play there as well as killing that one Hellion or trying to keep the Reaper alive with his Hellion, but both players just doing the right thing there. But Masa making a small mistake early on. Nate, I always feel early game, if you're walking around with like 2-3 units, keep those units together at all costs. As soon as one unit is separated from the back, you don't want to fight anymore because you're taking too much damage on a single unit and things will go bad from you from there.
In TVT especially, these Reaper openings with the quick Hellion off gas first have just gotten so much more popular in the last few months because if you play ladder, then it's like, oh, you move your first Reaper out, you run into his Reaper. It's like, okay, we both got kind of late ones, but then the second one shows up, you lose yours. Then the Hellion's there, and you're like, oh boy, 2 Marines aren't going to stop this. And you can lose the game actually very, very quickly. And we see with Marine Lord's follow-up going straight into a good amount of Hellions. If Masa has his Marines out of position because he's not building any more Hellions, then things can get pretty dicey for him. But that's why he's building this bunker. Masa recognizes, he says, hey, I don't want to lose this game early, so I'm going to expand, take a third base, and I'm just going to defend. Get a bunker. Don't take any chances.
Yeah, Marino is actually misreading this a tiny bit so far. He's throwing up 2 turrets, worried about Banshees that he doesn't have to worry about at all. He's not going to be able to do a whole lot over here as one of his Hellions gets picked up immediately. Masa gets some good shots over there as well. As long as he doesn't overextend, Masa should be fine over here.
Yeah, nice little dance here by Masa against Marine Lord. Picking off that Reaper. So basically losing nothing and killing a Hellion or 2, getting that Reaper, very nice.
And like you mentioned, Nate, that bunker helped out so much there, because if those 2 Marines are exposed and suddenly this becomes a little bit more tricky, Masa has to be very careful and cautious about how he wants to engage 4 Hellions. But this time, he was able to push out quite a bit of free damage, and then on a certain point he's like, cool, now I can actually chase.
Yeah, those 2 Marines would have died pretty much instantly, because even though they don't do a crazy amount of damage when it's just 2 non-stimmed Marines, having that bunker there causes it to be non-stop damage. There's nothing you can do about it. Your 4 Hellions aren't going to kill a bunker anytime soon.
Good scan there by Masa, sees everything. Masa, of course, went for the triple CC build. I kind of feel this has been going okay for Masa. He didn't really take any economic damage. He's opening up with 3 CCs. Marine Lord misread the build a tiny bit by throwing up a bunch of missile turrets. Worried about Banshees that he didn't have to worry about at all. I think if I'm Masa right now, Nate, I'm pretty satisfied with how this is going.
Yeah, Marine Lord's build is still set up where he could go for a big push later on. You swap the Raven building starport onto the reactor, which he has done that the barracks built. Now you build 3 Hellions at a time. We should see Marine Lord get Blue Flame very soon, and this will open up a big opportunity for him when this upgrade finishes to try to push in and kill all those Marines instantly. And even if you have Marauders, even if you have tanks, 30 Hellions are going to crush your face.
But is it safe to say that if Masa survives that push, he has pretty much won the game?
Basically, yeah. There's, you look at the things that were set up later. Marine Lord has just now started a 3rd command center, which is very nice for him, but he needs to do enough damage that with this, either he has, because there's 2 ways to look at it. It doesn't actually have to be an attack, but a heavy Viking Blue Flame Hellion setup makes it suicidal for Masa to try one of those big Terran Doom drops that you guys may have seen here and there in TVT. It's something that you always worried about when you're playing mech because your siege tanks move so slowly. But Marine Lord's saying, if I just use good control of Hellions and Vikings, I don't need to worry about tanks just yet.
It just feels like Masa has a really good read on this game so far, Nate. He still has that bunker. He's setting up a tank behind that bunker as well. I just kind of feel like he knows exactly what he's up against. He's going to spot this 3rd CC. That's really important for him as well. And now he's going to be aware of the fact, like, cool, mine is so much faster. Yours is on location, though. That's going to help you, but now it's delayed a little bit. Picked up the SFV. I really like how this is going for Masa. Of course, don't move out with like 3 or 4 bio units. Wait until you at least have 2-3 medevacs full of stim bio units before you ever want to fight against Marine Lord. But I'd say if I'm Masa right now, I'm absolutely thinking, hey, so far so good. This game is going exactly the way I want it.
Yep, he knows basically everything. Blue Flame, the large number of Hellions.
You have to be careful there. Like, this army's...
Yeah, this is actually, I'm kind of surprised he's moving out like this. Like, if Marine Lord runs straight up on top of that tank, You know, a lot of it comes down to whether those Hellions can splash on the Marauders and, you know, not have that armor do too much for them.
I kind of feel with 15 Hellions, Nate, it's going to be hard not to splash on the Marauders.
Yeah, well, at this point,
You'd have to make some serious work out of it.
It's very common with setups like this to just fly those Vikings with that Raven forward, drop turrets on the tank, and land the Vikings. And that's the kind of push that's really popular. But if you want to defend your third base on Iron Fortress, that's a little risky. And Masa put those depots by his bunker and keeps that tank back because he knows that he doesn't want to be vulnerable in any location. He needs the tank's siege to get splash on those Hellions.
You know, I must say Marino did a really good job of producing SCVs non-stop throughout the entirety of this game. Because he was on 2 CCs for much longer than Masa was, but he's dead even when it comes to workers. And of course Masa had to fly over that orbital, but still I kind of felt that Masa with that CC being so much faster, I kind of felt he should have had a few SCVs more than Marine Lord, but that's not the case at all.
I do like that Masa has cranked out so many Vikings. The simple fact of the matter is, if you want to play Bio versus Mech, and you build a bunch of medevacs and your opponent has a bunch of Vikings, because the Mech army doesn't really need that many medevacs, it's very easy for them to just kill your medevacs, and then you can't move forward with your tanks because you don't have vision. You have to constantly scan. That hurts your economy, and everything just gets really difficult for you. But Masa has built so many Vikings, he can actually contest and deal with any type of Hellbat drop onto his army play.
If you look at Marine Lord's main base, it's very hard to drop him. He has that sensor tower, and I really like that barracks that's floating on the north side over here. It's just like, you know, I didn't have anything there yet. Well, now he's going to throw up 2 more missile turrets. He's got so many turrets. He's like going up to 10 turrets immediately. Makes it extremely hard for Masa to ever drop this army. So Marino is basically just saying, like, if you want to kill me right now, it's going to have to be straight up. And running into a mech player, that's
running into this would be an awful decision. Like, you need to be very careful. We also have to consider that even though he has that Viking count, Marine Lord has point defense drone off that Raven, but also like that one tank shot. None of this bio is going to get healed. There's no medevacs here. Like, these Marines are permanently damaged. It feels weird to say that, but that's the case. He needs to get medevacs.
So if he stims once, then a couple of tanks will shoot one time.
Yeah,
and all
their
the
one
bio
shot
is dead.
their one shot is bio because none of those Marines are in the green health.
It's kind of an awkward push then by Masa. Don't you think so? With 0 medevacs?
Yeah, well, he just wants to try to deny from this low ground, which I can understand, but he's really baiting a big push to come out here. There are the Hellbats in those medevacs getting dropped on top of the siege tanks, and with this many Hellbats, there's the point defense drone to let these Vikings win that air battle,
man.
and he just cleans up the army that's here. The tank's still there, sure, dealing some damage, but now the Vikings are going to win out this trade for Marine Lord, and he still has the tank backbone.
And he has plenty of Hellbats as well, so it's not like these bio units can just stim up and pick up the last 2 remaining tanks. I felt that was a very cost-efficient fight for Marine Lord, and he would probably do that all over again. Flo's pointing it out as well. Masa had a Viking lead once upon a time, now it's 8 against 1.
Yep.
Ravens are pretty good.
Ravens are good units in Terran versus Terran. There's like almost no scenario where building an early game Raven is bad for you in TVT. It's so much utility that it gives you, especially in scenarios like this.
He did kill 7 SCVs during all this. Like, this one tank is doing some serious work. There's one tank there on the low
Denying
ground.
that gas is really the linchpin here, because you do want to push this army off of you, but it seems Marine Lord's being a little bit overcautious with trying to move his tanks forward. He just needs to seal this position. Once these tanks siege, if he can hold them there, that's nice, but they get picked off. Really, he's having a hard time actually getting a good spot here.
But there's no more high ground vision though, and there are still so many Vikings on the side of Marine Lord, so I don't think Masa can keep this up, especially not because he still only has 1 medevac. Oh, look at this one Marine! Man,
Wow,
what a guy!
That's just smart right there, getting even
This
more worker
tank has got
kills.
so many kills already. This tank is right now up to 19 kills.
He's a hero, and Masa
Soon
during
to be
all
a
of this,
commander, Nate.
soon to be a commander. And during all this, Masa just been rallying forces across the map. We're really seeing that contain on the mech player as you try to approach max supply with Marine Lord. It's very difficult when you don't have that extra gas. You're building units like Banshees and Medevacs that are nice, but you want to keep that tank count nice and high.
Well, I love the dance over here. Masa trying to pull Marino a little bit out of position. Has to be so careful though, because the tank count is growing. There are a bunch of Tors in the mix as well. But he was able to get 1 or 2 tanks over there. He's taking his support base as well during all this. I still feel that how are you supposed to break this, Nate? He's doing a really good job. I just don't think it's ever going to snowball.
Yeah, it's more about buying time, I'd have to imagine. At some point or another, Marine Lord's going to want to push out to either take a 4th, which will expose his flank, or he'll push out into the center of the map where he might be caught and unsieged. And if he's constantly in his face, then he will be there whenever he's unsieged.
Why are Masa's upgrades so slow? He doesn't even have 2-2 yet. It's not even
he
on
just
the
wants
way
to
yet.
have more forces, I guess. It's a bit crazy, actually. Now this Banshee, this is where that air control becomes so useful. It's like, oh, run up and snipe the Banshee, and all your Marines die.
Yeah, Marine Lord is doing this very well as well. I feel like
It's all about patience.
he's under pressure, but he's not panicking. Like you said, he has plenty of patience. He's handling this very well. Perhaps wants to go for it. Metavex will fly forward, drop the Hellbats on top of the tanks.
Really beautiful execution of this push. He has the Thors lined up behind this. Those are going to wail away at those very low hit point Marauders quite easily. That Banshee is just guaranteed sustained damage. And even though Masa secured that 4th base behind this, you mentioned it earlier, cost effectiveness. That's what mech is all about. It's about having this army that you're not going to be able to break once it reaches critical mass. At 183 supply, this army is close to untouchable. I love these walls. I love this setup for Masa, but he needed to get some better trades so that he could stay out on the map. This is to stop harass, not pushes.
I have no idea how Masa is now supposed to deal with all this. He's going to evacuate a bunch of SCVs immediately, and I think that's a very wise decision. Like you mentioned, these two Banshees are doing some real serious work. Every single time these Marines want to come close, there are a bunch of tanks behind the Banshees taking care of it. Very solid execution of the build from Marine Lord. Never panicked, even though he lost a bunch of SCVs. There were a bunch of tanks being very annoying. And Masa seemed like he had a very, set forward, dedicated plan about how he wanted to approach this game. It was a unique build, skipping the Metavex and going for the Vikings. It just seemed like in the end, as soon as he lost the air control, there was almost no way he was going to be able to make it work anymore.
I'm impressed that he was able to make it work, because that's one of the reasons why I guess you would have asked Marine Lord earlier. It's like, would you really mech on Iron Fortress? It's like, yeah, that 3rd base is so exposed, but he had it really well done. Like the floating barracks in the west side with all those missile turrets. He constantly had vision, and now he gets to run in. Now he gets to harass with these Hellions, and much better at killing SCVs than a few Marauders.
Yep, he's already killed 27 SCVs since the first time he actually moved out. I do like this by Masa. He's going to try to counterattack. I'm not sure how much there is at home. Bunch of Hellbats, bunch of tanks, Planetary Fortress as well. They should be able to stim forward and pick up these tanks one more time. Of course, a lot of bio will go down in the process, but I guess this was his best option.
Yeah, well, he's trying to buy himself time, but it's just not enough. GG is called. Marine Lord takes game number 1 against Masa here, showing, well, the French strength. Honestly, as much as I like Masa as a player, and all the times I've had to talk, I've chatted with him quite a bit, and as good as he is, Marine Lord is just someone that comes into this group for me as a big favorite, and he just showed why. Masa did not seem to make any big mistakes. We talked about the faster 3rd command center. His build order was great. He had that bunker set up in time. Didn't take any damage in the early game, and went for this big push. He wasn't slowed down at all getting that lockdown on the 3rd, and Marine Lord just brushed it off. He's like, yeah, it seems like I got like a fly on my shoulder, and that was pretty much it.
No, he did it. I felt he did it really well all along. It's just a very solid, patient play by Marine Lord. Despite the fact that Masa really seemed to go for this build because he was playing against Marine Lord. I don't think he would ever do this against the Terran if you don't really know his style. It seems like Masa has done his homework, and he just thought that it would work early game. Didn't really go his way.
This build is too popular is the thing, though. So many Terrans are used to seeing this now. That's why, even if you're being defensive, you still open up with 2 Reapers and 2 Hellions off gas first, because it does, well controlled, it can kill you pretty easily.
Overall, I think it was a pretty cool game to start the day off with. Of course, we're going to see plenty of Terran versus Terran today. This is our first mirror matchup, by the way, in 4 days of StarCraft 2 action.
Yeah, every day it came in, I was like, okay, maybe we'll have a TVT today. Next day, maybe we'll have a ZVZ. Next day, maybe ZVZ. No mirror at all. And some people would say that's a great day, and they only like watching the off matchups. But those are it's still pretty nice, because Terran versus Terran does give us a lot of these explosive games. Not really too many slow periods, to say the least.
I definitely think TVT right now is in a better place than it was roughly a year ago when we casted pretty much every single day.
We've moved away from the Doom Drop meta. We've moved away.
There was a time where the average length of a TVT that you and I were casting was probably like 11 minutes or something like that. It was insane, especially because TVT had the reputation.
Well, even ladder TVT can still be like that quite a bit. But it's nicer that in preparation for series, like a build like Marine Lords was, or Moss, as I could say, were both set up very well to do a bit of pressure, but not committed to the point where they just instantly win or lose.
This is one more. This is one of these final battles. This was the first battle. If you take a look at the Vikings as well of Masa, the Vikings were a little bit indecisive. I didn't mention this during the game, but they were shooting at the Metavex, turning around, shooting at the Metavex again, and then suddenly they're like, no, let's try to fight the other Vikings. But
and then they shot the Raven too, and it's just like, well, now the Vikings win this fight massively, and you're never going to have air control.
Yeah, but I think it was almost inevitable that Marine Lord's Vikings were going to win that fight because of that double point defense drone as well. And he was pretty much even in numbers up to that point. There was almost no way that Masa was ever going to be able to win that. Like, if Marine Lord would have underdone it, or didn't commit properly to his Viking production, if it's only 3 or 4 Vikings, then Masa could have still won. But The Viking count was very high as well on the side of Marine Lord. He just read the build from Masa quite okay, and he had all the right answers.
Yeah, I mean, Marine Lord went into this game saying, okay, I understand the obvious weaknesses of my build. I'm going to have a big drop defense, and this will allow me to put all my chips in one area. He could keep all of his forces together, and that's where Mech is strongest. And you want to pull him around with drops. Marine Lord said to himself that instead of spending a lot of minerals on Hellions to go harass, he would just build a lot of missile turrets, be safe against that harass, and then go into Hellbat drops to complement that, since he obviously didn't have the biggest army, but then it built up over time.
He had over 10 missile turrets in a certain phase in the game, but it was all okay for him.
If it works, it works.
Yeah, but second game of this series is going to be played on Cactus Valley, and we'll see if this man is going to be in more problems or trouble than he was on Iron Fortress. We're of course looking in the main base of our French Terran, representing Millennium, it is Marine Lord. Had an absolutely phenomenal run in his first Premier League season ever. You know, last season we were talking about it. It's about time that he gets that far, because he was getting a lot of hype, didn't have the results, but last season he played great. Yeah,
and he's done a really good job of carrying France forward. His opponent, down 0-1 in this first best of 3 here, the World Championship Series, is Root Gaming's Masa. I believe, don't actually know if he's still been living there, but I know he spent a good amount of time at the Root House in Northern California, so it's he's had time to practice with the teammates and whatnot, and especially preparing with I guess kind of weird, right? His teammate for this group potentially.
It's funny as well because they were in the same group in WCS Premier League Season 2, Masa and Igus.
Yeah.
It's funny how that happens sometimes.
Those Root team kills, man. Hydra had to play against Kelazir, or you could say it's a good thing because it just means Root has so many players qualifying for the World Championship Series.
No, there were seasons where I think they had 5 players even qualifying. This season I think it's 4, but I think in the past it's been 5.
Yeah, I guess it depends if Major was on Root during that season
I was about to make that joke as well, but I was like, I'm not going to go there. Juanita doesn't need that right now. That's amazing. It is cross-map Cactus Valley. Nate, as our resident Terran expert, talk to me. Could this potentially change the way that Marine Lord is going to play here, or are we still going to see mech from him?
It's pretty similar in a weird way to like Iron Fortress in terms of you have no ramp leading into your natural. The choke point's tighter, but it doesn't matter as much in this matchup. The third base still feels pretty exposed, and I would say it's going to be even more difficult to stop a push like the one that Masa did on Iron Fortress if he goes for a siege up on this third base, because both of them, if we take a look at those third base options for either Marine Lord or Masa, you have this high ground position that you can use to set up. Then you move that Banshee forward, and the Banshee's like hitting your base or a couple of Hellions. And if you try to kill either of those, the tanks on the high ground can just rip you to pieces.
Do you think that would be his third base? I would rather say it's on the right side of his main.
I mean, either one, it still has the same problem. Like if we look at this base that Flo has their mouse over, like if we look here, there's still that high ground position that in TVT really complicates things.
It just feels easier to defend this one, because then you're kind of just defending a triangle rather than this long linear lane if you would take the base on the north side.
Yeah, defending those triangles can be a lot easier. You can put them in just close enough to the center that you can cover all 3 points at once, and then still the missile turrets will also be useful because the ones at your third will help defend your main too.
Of course, this goes mostly for Marine Lord. Is there a chance we're going to see Masa just do the exact same thing of Marine Lord? What's stopping him right now, Nate?
I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. Masa, to me, mostly a bio player, unlikely to go for that big aggression. But if we really think about it, like Marine Lord's likely to play mech again. It went so well, almost no reason not to. But outside of that, I'm honestly not sure. Like Masa should try to switch it up. If he does the same build as the last map, I think it'll work better, but still pretty risky. The other thing about that third base that you mentioned is you can siege the natural from the low ground if you take that. If you take the other base as your third.
Marine Lord is definitely switching it up. Of course, in the previous game it was Reaper Hellion Hellion, or Reaper Hellion. This time it's going to be pretty quick Glock Banshee, most likely. It could be a super quick Raven as well, but it kind of feels like it's shaping up for some Banshee arrest.
Yeah, I can see it. It's also possible that if you really wanted to go for a Raven again defensively, you could. Okay, there's Cloak. Yeah, so Banshee. Never a bad play. If you're the kind of player that can do good control, like Bunny, I think is the guy that always shows it.
Does he have to be careful being Nate with a Hellion and 2 Reapers?
Yeah, it can be really tricky. The Hellion actually getting a good amount of splash damage on the Marines. This is what I was talking about with these 2 Reaper
sick
builds.
micro by Masa, man. He keeps everything alive.
Yeah, he has the SCV here too, so he can actually fix that Hellion up while the Reapers regenerate their life points.
Wow, what a play by Masa. This is going to get a little bit dicey. Marine Lord knows it as well.
This is what I was talking about.
Oh my god, this could really snowball out of control.
He needs to be very careful.
I mean, that Banshee is going to be out in roughly 10 seconds, but he's rallying it across the map right now. I don't recommend that. I'd say keep that Banshee at home for a tiny bit.
2 Hellions and 2 Reapers. You
Yeah.
know, once you kill those Marines, the Reapers run into the mineral line, and then the Hellions go to work elsewhere. Now the Banshee is here. Very important to have this. The Hellions will be pushed back, and if you're Masa, you want to dance around this for a little bit. He has a Viking on the way. He has one Viking actually done, another Viking in production. So for him, it's more about get the missile turrets up, cover all of your production, your mineral lines, and just try to grab this one. He could actually, he's rallied out. He's trying to catch that Banshee in the middle of the map. With his Reapers at the tower, he can see where it is.
Cloak is not ready yet. Cloak will be ready in 10 seconds, as we can see on the right side of our screen. But that should be enough for this Viking to at least do a serious amount of damage. At a single scan, should be a guaranteed kill. Well, that was a good Cloak there. I actually don't think you want to scan just
You want
yet.
to force the Cloak, though. That's one of the other things that Moss is doing with this Viking moving out, is he's forcing the Banshee to Cloak earlier. It won't be
With
able
2
to
Vikings,
do as much
1
damage.
scan should be enough, right?
Yeah, I think so. He's going to catch it very much so on the end of that scan. Gets it.
That was really close, actually.
Yeah, you know, for those of you who don't know, if a Banshee slips out of that scan range prior to being hit by those Viking missiles, it's actually invincible.
Yep. Fair Dragon recently made a graphic of that thing.
Yeah. That's like it's always your fear. That's one of the most frustrating moments in any TVT is when you think you're about to kill that Banshee. Wow. I thought for sure one of those units was dead. But that's one of the worst feelings is when you're like, oh, I'm going to kill the Banshee, and then it slips by and you're like, ah. It's a bad feeling, Kevin.
It's worse with Dark Templars, though, isn't it, Nate?
Well, everything Protoss-wise feels worse when it kills you.
I know. I can confirm. I hate Oracles too, Nate.
As long as we both agree on that one.
The Banshee for a split second there was in range of this missile turret, at least the detection range. Of course, the detection range is a little bit bigger than the attack range of the turret. So Marine Lord knows he's not going to be able to do a whole lot of damage with his Banshees anymore, but he forced out a bunch of turrets and he kind of knows what he's playing against. And that Banshee did keep him safe early on, because if he wouldn't have had the Banshee at home, those 5 Marines would have been in a world of trouble against 2 Reapers and 2 Hellions.
Yeah. And, you know, 3 command center follow-ups for everybody here. That Marine trying to maybe do a little bit of baiting into that that Widow Mine. The Banshee's going to come back, actually, so could possibly kill either the Hellion or the Reaper. Pick your poison.
Both units are very fast, though.
Yeah. That Banshee, man. Power. Ooh. I actually thought he could have killed one of them. The
He's going to take the shortcut, Nate. He's going for the interception. Man, I wish that I could have a real-life jetpack that would be faster than a helicopter. Wouldn't that be amazing? I'd buy that toy in a heartbeat.
That does sound pretty awesome.
I know you would order it on Amazon the day it opens up, Nate.
Yeah, man. Get that same-day delivery of my jetpack.
It's like, how cool would it be? Like someone takes a helicopter and you wave at Kobe Bryant in his helicopter. You're like, well, Kobe Bryant, I've got a jetpack. I'm actually faster than you.
Marine Lord's opened up with a lot faster Vikings, you know, relative to everything else that he's set up in this game. He's not playing with Hellions at all, because I imagine his biggest fear is dealing with some sort of aggressive drop play. And once he gets situated on 3 bases, we'll see him switch into heavier missile turrets, and still very light on the Hellions. He knows that Moss is not likely to be vulnerable to like a Hellion run by, so he'd rather invest his money somewhere where it will actually pay off for him.
It's going to get tricky for Masa once oh, look at that. Masa has to kill one of his own tech labs in his main base. Quick flow, quick. There he is. He had to fly over, I think, the factory was. Because the tanks were stuck. And even when he lifted up the factory, he was still stuck. I don't know why he just didn't
Breaks my Terran heart, Roddy.
Why
only
wouldn't he just...
happens to us. Just build the add-on on the other side. The dream.
I think he could have kept it alive, lift up the starport temporarily, get the tanks out.
Yeah, but doing that endlessly is really Jimmy Rustling.
But for, I think Marauders could fit through though. Marauders are smaller than tanks.
That is a reasonable solution.
Yeah, so then you could use one of your Rexes. Penny saved is a penny earned.
The 25 gas. If he loses this game because he's missing 50 minerals and 25 gas, I don't know what I'll do.
I know what I will do.
Make a shrine to your Terran knowledge, Rotterdam. I promise.
2 more factories go up for Marine Lord, as he's probably quite pleased with how this is going. Any mech player in general, as long as nothing crazy is happening for the first 15 minutes of the game,
you're happy.
Yeah, you're kind of happy, you know. Just don't attack me. Take your time. Whatever you want to do, let my supply go up. Because mech, it's like this magic number. A mech army of 120, 130 supply is just not that scary yet. They don't have enough units to cover everything.
Yeah, it's like once you hit 160, you know, you're going to see some real stuff, that's for sure.
That's when you know you're pretty much safe to leave a couple units behind and start moving out as well. And then it's also like, it's kind of like this milestone mark. If you reach 160, 99 over 100 times, you will be able to max out as well in that game. And and that's of course where mech truly shines, and where it's going to be hard for those bio units from Masa to make the difference.
Yeah, and with this many Vikings, the constant air production is so nice with the Raven that has maxed energy too. How are you supposed to engage this directly? You know, the point defense drone, even if Masa decided he didn't want to play air, which, by the way, he's playing air. He has a Raven as well. Even though he's going for bio, he wants a little bit of counterplay to the other Raven. It blocks Marauder shots, too.
This kind of reminds me of watching Innovation against Fantasy, where I think Fantasy opened up with bio units, but only got 1-1 upgrades as well, and then he switched into mech. Do you think there is a chance that somewhere mid-game, Masa stops making bio and goes full mech as well?
I think at some point you go more into air with siege tanks, for sure. But it also comes down to where he invests in his upgrades, because his armory is coming in a little bit later. So if you're behind, that really hurts the siege tank, because when siege tanks are fighting against each other, it's 4 shots to kill another tank until you have +1, and then it's 1 less shot. So you win those fights very easily if you're Marine Lord and you're up a whole upgrade.
Like, what excited me as a non-Terran player from watching that style is that I kind of get it, right? Like, you use your mobility of bio at first to get your tanks in better positions, and you make it hard for the mech player from the get-go to really be everywhere, and you get like a soft contain off sort of, and you get a nice little, you kind of corner him on his side of the map. That's kind of what Fantasy was doing. And then on a certain point, he just stopped making bio altogether, and he just only rallied tanks and Vikings and Ravens across the map. Yeah. And I just thought it was a very smart playstyle. He made it work as well.
It's a very good way to play. Yeah. It's very, very good. Bio units are never going to win you a late game TVT engagement. It's going to be all about the Vikings, siege tanks, and Ravens usually. In this fight, we really see just the point defense drone coming into play, denying the shots of both of those forces, and it's just so weird because even if they trade out the air armies, it's still very difficult to actually push into the other player.
I mean, it's good enough for Masa in a way, I guess you could say, because he wins that fight with 3 Vikings remaining, but the scan goes down immediately for Marine Lord, so he does get a couple volleys off on these tanks, and cross map, it's going to be very hard to reinforce for now, because Masa won that fight, but he didn't win it decisively.
No. Knocking out the air force of the mech player is always nice, because what it does mean is Masa can try to squeeze out a few medevacs to heal that bio. But Marine Lord notices this. He's like, you don't actually have that much here. He's like, get out of here. I'm going to kill your siege tank. I'm going to kill everything that you've got over here.
These tanks still doing quite well from Masa, getting at least 2 tanks, maybe even 3 in the end. No, it's just 2 for now. As these 2 Vikings will have to retreat because Big Daddy Thor has showed up to the party. Masa is reinforcing with a lot of bio units still, doesn't have too many medevacs. His upgrades are a lot quicker, by the way. You remember the previous game, he started +2 attack at the 18-minute mark. This is the 17-minute mark, and +2 attack is almost done. That should have a reasonable impact, right?
Yeah, and here's the other problem now. Without that air army to really help push the position away, he's in a lot of trouble. The third base is, like I said, you have the tanks in that high ground position. We talked about it at the beginning of the game. The tanks are on that high ground spot. His 4th base spread him out, made him more vulnerable. Now he needs to siege up here, but it's still so difficult to get a good spot. He needs to drop the Hellbats on the siege tanks. He will do that, but this spread's still quite nice for Masa. But Marine Lord, the tank positioning just in time to defend him. The Hellbat drop was tantamount to his victory in this fight.
He's going to try to get a couple of these Marauders as well with these Hellbats that will be unloaded. Look at this one Marine trying to shoot down the medevac.
Force fields!
But it's not going to happen. Really well done. Marine Lord just crushed Masa there. It looked like Marine Lord was a little bit out of position, but he just made all the correct moves there. And Masa perhaps getting a little bit overeager, but Marine Lord couldn't have handled that any better.
It was really nice. If you had to talk about what makes a mech player good, it's how they handle that lack of mobility.
Oh, God.
It's what they mix in to deal with being slow. And in this game, it's these Hellbat drops. They just do so much burst damage, and they really shine in these fights where the tanks aren't sieged up yet.
2 Vikings showing up. That's good news for Masa as he took out one of these medevacs. But
where's the Thor?
Yeah, it's still there. It's doing a little bit of extra damage.
Boom!
In the end, it was 2 Vikings for a medevac and a Viking. So
still important to keep that ability to throw these medevacs around. If the Vikings had survived, then that's where things can get really, really tricky. Double drop's going to be sent towards the northwest side. The 4th base is a planetary, but
look at Marine Lord's main base on the north side. There's just so many turrets there. It's a ring of turrets. He's like, you want to drop me? Go ahead, man. Just
good luck.
Give it your all. Yeah, good luck, Commander. Now I think of Apollo when he's pointing his finger. Good luck, Commander.
It's not going to happen, though. Not in this game. Trying to drop that would be a bit silly, I'd say. to say the least. And these double drops moving over. The other nice thing is that right outside sensor tower range, watching his blind spot, he has that floating barracks. So he'll see the medevac and be like, oh, okay, there it is. And at the same time, his army's out on the map. This is like just a small pathetic force. This isn't going to do anything.
That was not even
like
an army.
That army you can't, yeah, exactly, couldn't even call it an army. That didn't deserve to be out on the map.
It didn't deserve to be there. It shouldn't be there on its own.
Go home.
Yeah,
you don't belong here.
That was an army of poor parroting. Like, keep those units at home. At least until there are more
Those
people.
aren't the Marines and Marauders you want to hang out with, Kev.
No,
for sure.
that's the bad
Just
time.
take you down to dark alleyways with lots of fire. Here comes the next big push. And the thing is, the bio doesn't want those Hellbats dropped on top of them, so they run away. This opens space. This creates space for the siege tanks to get in position. And now he's in between all the bases.
Yeah,
you can send Hellions to here, there, bada bing, bada boom. What are you going to do?
Marine Lord has more units, and a lot of the army supply of Masa is on the other side of the map as well. And there's absolutely nothing that army can do. It's 2 medevacs full of bio units. I don't even think it would make the difference, and Masa knows it as well. He's in so much trouble as GG is called, and our French Terran Marine Lord, quarter-finalist of WCS Premier League Season 2, shows up here. Nate, he's here for business again.
And I like that you use those words. He shows up. You know, this is the Marine Lord that we were talking about. You know, being as good as he is, he did not really make any mistakes, honestly. Masa had good builds, but it was more like Marine Lord saw this. He's like, okay, he's like, you're not bad, but I've probably killed this push like 1,000,000 times on ladder. He had no difficulty at all.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it also feels like Marine Lord is not the type of Terran player in TVT that skips a whole lot or that cuts a whole lot of corners. Because I'm looking at this, and you know, we don't even have Fog of War turned on. I don't really come up with something immediately like, oh, this build, you know, if Masa would have done that, it would crush this build of Marine Lord immediately. It seems pretty solid and safe all around.
When I look at Marine Lord strategy, if I'm like trying to find a weakness, the obvious thing is that Marine Lord has close to no map presence. Outside of the Banshee, he didn't build Hellions. In the first game, he built a few more Hellions, but he still cut them down quite a bit until he was ready to get to his medevac stage. So Marine Lord is willing to say to his opponent, I'm going to build a few less units so that I can have enough Vikings and tanks to stop any big pushes or drops you could do in exchange for you not getting harassed for, you know, a little bit of time. And it was really interesting because Masa played right into it. Masa's like, I'm going to build more Vikings this game. I'm going to get a Raven too, and I'm going to make this big air push. And then he kills all the Vikings, and it's like, well, I have a Thor, so you're not going to kill me with, you know, Banshees or anything silly. And I still have more tanks because I didn't build any Hellions this game. And on top of that, it allows him to have those missile turrets. It's like Masa couldn't, there was nowhere for him to really do anything, it felt like, in this series.
I love your TVT passion, Nate. It gets me going. I think the boys at the desk want to say something about this series as well, but I do see where you're going with it. But Will, take it away.
Thank you, Roddy. And yeah, I mean, it was a fun match to see. And of course, I think a lot of people were wondering in the first game that there was an interesting point, of course, from Masa. What was he going for? And Nate and Roddy did a good job of kind of telling us. Well, and Nate especially said, well, it was interesting because he made it work up to a point, and even that was impressive. You know, kind of skipping those medevacs and trying to make it work. And Nate was impressed that it got even to that point. But how did you guys view this match overall?
Well, it came down to basically Masa was the hare in the battle, and Marine Lord was the tortoise. It was a classic battle of mech versus bio, and of course the mech being the slower player, they're just defending, taking that slow pace, and then Masa trying to bounce around the map, trying to do damage, trying to be aggressive, was just not finding a hole in the defense of Marine Lord.
Yeah, I liked Rotterdam's comment about Marine Lord not making a lot of mistakes. Like, he did not take big risks here, and he just seemed to be kind of the glacial, slow-moving, unstoppable juggernaut. Like, every time he pushed out and attacked, that was the final attack. Every time he defended, he waited until he needed to be, you know, defensive, actually, like, and until a critical point was actually under attack, and then he pushed out. And it was just a very clear, concise vision of a guy who came in here and probably is the favorite. We talked about that. And in order to be the favorite, you got to play like the favorite. So he was the heavyweight contender defending the belt, and in this case, kind of Ronda Rousey'd him, like 37-second knockout, man. We've seen better stuff from Masa. I feel bad because, well, I don't feel that bad. It's our job to hype up these guys. We were like, Masa's really good TVT. And in this series, Marine Lord he made him look underclassed.
I mean, yeah, Marine Lord definitely made it seem easy. Like you said, it seemed like he was just playing his own game, right? He wasn't too concerned about what Masa was doing. As Nate mentioned, if you were to pick out a weakness, it would be that maybe he didn't have as much map presence. But it seemed like Marine Lord was like, you know what, I don't need it, because I know what I can defend. I know how to deal with the space around me, and that's all that matters.
Yeah,
exactly.
The strength of mech has always been just defend. You have all these great late game units. You have the tanks, the Vikings, the Ravens, even the Hellbats are going to be far superior to the bio player that only has really Marines, Marauders, and Medevacs and sprinkled in tanks. But as long as you can max out, you can go to that late game composition. A 200 army of mech versus a 200 army of bio, mech will always win. And Masa could just never find the hole in the perimeter, as you were saying, Will. There's just Marine Lord's defense was impeccable.
Yeah, he played it out really well, and I like that you keep bringing out the point with the fact that the bios, I mean, they kind of even look like they're scrambling against the tanks, right? They're trying to stim in, and then they get hit by a tank, and they're like, oh, well, actually, that just like doubles their stim damage, and they run back out. They're just scurrying back and forth, and as you guys mentioned, Masa just wasn't able to do the damage he needed earlier on to make it worth it. As Nate and Roddy were saying during the game, too, I mean, there were trades, but it seemed like Roddy put it a nice way, I think, every time was the fights that Masa won were not decisive enough for him to really consider the victory. It was like, all right, well, you got out with 2 extra units, but what does that really mean when Marine Lord's technically going to be already ahead if he's building more tanks and all the Viking power that he's going to have over your airspace? So Marine Lord going through, I mean, kind of as you guys might have expected, and maybe everyone at home too, in that first match. Do you think overall, as Nate and Roddy were saying, this is the Marine Lord that can potentially go all the way? Because if Marine Lord wins this whole season, like, he actually has an excellent chance of making it to the global finals.
Okay, yeah.
That's a big F. He was like,
he was like groups.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
You went way big picture than I was like getting off that train so quick. Chober, I was like, whoa. It's like,
Jeff was like, yeah. Here's my ticket, and he's like, oh, this is going to Paris. Oh no.
He could do it.
Not me.
Not that far just yet. We are still just in the round of 32. We haven't seen all the players yet, but at least in the groups, you think it's like, all right, as expected, should be a cruise control here for Marine Lord.
Well, yeah, but it's just the first group, and I want to. My estimate is that Masa's going to warm up, and I think we're going to see better stuff from him. I do think Marine Lord is the best player in this group, but with this format, it's really nice. 2 players advance of 4. So I hope Masa kind of recollects himself and shows better games, because we'll see how this next series goes. But Iagaz, I think, is a very good TVT player, very dangerous there. But maybe not as good as Marine Lord, so that's a little bit more of a doable match. And then Haas is the wild card, and Terrans have gotten conditioned, you could say, very well into defending cheese.
All right, well, it's time to find out after this break, of course. Haas is going to show up to play, but how is Iagaz going to deal with that one right after this, ladies and gentlemen?